Hey, Chris from Codify Academy here. In this video, we're going to take the Facebook paper prototype we did from the last video and convert it into a website. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I've never done this one before, so we are going to struggle a bit together, but that's okay. You're going to see the whole process from taking it from a paper prototype to struggling through and actually building it into a website. Here's my paper prototype from the last video and the additions I made to it. I'm going to keep these close by as we're taking the final steps to build a site from scratch. Understand that you need to practice this process if you want to be good at it. Doing it once is not enough. You need to do it often. I do these types of projects all the time and for many years, and I'm going to struggle here. Okay, so now let's get started. We're going to need to create a copy of our template folder as always. This is how we start our projects every time. I'm going to move it into week 2. And I'm going to name it Facebook. Just like always, we're going to open up the index file in our browser and the project folder in our text editor. So we're going to clean out our index file here and adjust our screen. First thing I'm going to add in is a title to our web page. And I'm going to struggle to split this CSS file to the bottom so we can have the HTML on top, CSS on the bottom. And again, that needs to be cleared out. Okay, so we should have our blank web page now. And following my paper prototype, I'm going to add in the HTML that I predefined. So we're going to add in our section tag, and then we're going to create our divs with all the classes that we said we were going to add on to them. So our first one, div with the class of logo, and we're going to add a comment as well. Don't forget that, always important. We're going to do our intro next, and then we're going to follow that up by the CTA, our call to action, what we want our person to do. So just keep in mind, these classes are completely arbitrary. I just made them up. Okay, so in the CSS, I'm going to actually set up some comments so I know where I'm going to actually put my CSS. And then I'm going to add in this anchor tag. This is going to be our logo leading to facebook.com if they click on it, and I'm going to add in the target blank so it opens up in a new tab. Let's just double check, make sure that shows up. I have auto refresh so it shows up. And then I'm going to select our div and I'm going to add a background color. So I'm going to use a tool right now to find the background color. You'll see this in some following videos. Just trying to get the background color here. Again, I could have gone with anything. With this project, we're just trying to practice. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. And so there we go, our background's showing up pretty great. We'll update the color of our font because that's the next thing that stands out to me. Oh, but it didn't actually work, so remember we're using an anchor tag, so we actually need to style the color in the anchor tag. Awesome, so that's working. And then I'm going to go in and inspect. I'm going to actually make my changes in the developer tools. I'd like to see the changes happening immediately. I don't want to do my changes in my CSS and see if it works. That's really time consuming and annoying. So next up is padding, and just trying to space it out. Notice that we're using a inline element, so if we update to inline block, our padding's going to apply on the top and the bottom. It was applying on the left and the right because of the inline, but remember when we add that block, when we add that inline block, it adds the padding to the top and the bottom as well. All right, and let's increase the font size. One other thing, I'm going to go on the div with the class of logo and text align center that. Now that it's working like I wanted to, I'm going to paste all of these properties into my CSS. And we're going to go with this practice where we're actually alphabetizing the properties so it's a little easier for me to read later. So that's it. That's the logo right there. We got that navigation logo done. Great. One last thing though, we do need a font for it. The fonts aren't quite the same. So I'm just going to spend a quick second trying to find one that looks similar. I don't care if it's the same here. I just want something that looks similar. So I think Open Sans is probably our best bet. It looks pretty close to the same as their font. Go ahead and use that technique we learned to add in Google Fonts. Make a quick comment and paste in the link, and that's it. We need to add it to our CSS next, and then it should work fine. And I need to grab the code from Google, and let's test it out. There we go. It's a little thin though still, so we want to try some stuff. We'll see if we can't customize the font, get a little thicker font. We'll try the 700. Okay, and here's the updated link. We'll try to override that in our HTML. And then in our CSS, we'll try adding the additional font weight. So we included 700, so that's one we can use. And if we test it out, it looks a little too thick to me. So let's try the 600. I'm just going to update the file path here, change it from 7 to 6. And then in my CSS, 7 to 6. And we can see, oops. And we can see, okay. Yeah, it looks pretty good, I think. So there we go, nav's done. Okay, so let's move on. The next thing I want to do is add a background color to our section element. And it's not really applying, so let me test to see if I can't add some height and force this background to show up. Okay, cool. So our light blue background showing up. Let's try light gray. No, it doesn't really work. Let's try F2, F2, F2. Okay, and I'll take this as a background. It's not identical, but whatever, close enough. So we'll go into our CSS. We'll select our section element. Now let's add a class actually onto our section. And then we can select the class name, just in case you want to use another section tag for whatever reason. And we'll give it that background color. Okay, so let's add some more content because I know that when I add more content, the height will actually increase on that element. So in our paper prototype, we have an icon and an H1, but I'm actually going to put the icon inside of the H1. So I'm going to create our I tag inside of the H1, and below that I'm going to add our text in. Okay, so I'm going to set up our class here, and then I'm going to actually need to go to Font Awesome because I have no idea what this icon is. It's probably like phone or something like that. But again, I don't memorize these icon names. That's crazy. I'm just going to go to fontawesome.io, check out the icons tab, and do a quick search. So again, I think it's phone. So type that in. There we go. We have the mobile. So FA mobile, I was close. All right, so we can add that class into our element. So we should have a phone showing up and some text now. So let's add a few selectors into our CSS. Okay, cool. So there we go. We have our icon sitting next to our font in our H1. So here's where the struggle begins. But what we're going to need is another shade for the actual border that goes around the whole element. Okay, so let's go to the color picker. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to add in light yellow. And let's just try a few to see which one we think is going to work best. And let's choose a few shades darker when we're doing this. Okay, now I can see that. And let's get a much darker shade for the border. Let's try this out. Okay, definitely more visible. And I'm going to add in some border radius of 6 pixels to see what happens. And let's increase this till we like it. 25 pixels, okay. My eyes are a little off, but I'm going to reduce this in a little bit here. This is definitely too high, but whatever, 25 is fine for now. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in this font size of 24 pixels to our H1 tag inside of our intro. It's just going to resize it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy all of our code from our intro selector into our H1 intro selector. That way, all of the properties are being applied to the H1 instead of our div with our class of intro. Okay, and then let's play around with the padding. I think 10 pixels should be okay, so let's add that into our code. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to actually wrap all of this code inside of the H1, right around this anchor tag, so we can link to somewhere else, because the text looks like it should link somewhere. Right, and here we go, our text is blue. And we're going to use the wrapper class, select all of our anchors inside, and we'll remove our text decoration. We're also going to change up the font color, and we'll change it to that Facebook blue that we've been using. So we couldn't reduce the font weight, but let's try reducing the font size. And there we go. It looks pretty good. Let's try reducing the radius. Okay, 15. Looks okay. Let's try to increase the font size a little bit more. And there we go. I think that's good. Okay, awesome. We can move on to the last part of our paper prototype, and arguably probably the most complicated. But that's okay. We're going to start with the HTML. Let's just build out what we designed earlier on paper. Okay, so in our HTML, we're going to create an input tag, And the type we're just going to leave as text. And we're going to add a placeholder that's going to be for the email or for phone. I'm going to make a copy of that. Below that, I'm going to change the type to password. So when the person types in, it's actually going to be hidden. And we'll update that placeholder. Then we have our login button below. We'll set our type to button here. And I think I'm going to wrap this text just inside of a div because it's not really doing anything, but that way it will actually break the line for us. Then we have our create new account button. And below that, the last two elements we're going to do are forgetting password. And if you ever want to go to the help center, we'll have that button for them. So we're actually going to build this out in a UL, LI, and A tag so we can link to it as well. And hopefully we'll use that to get a dot. But probably going to have to change that. Remember, we shouldn't style with HTML. But here we have it. It looks pretty good so far. HTML is done. Okay, and then we're going to style our class CTA. We're going to modify the width here and add the margin so that the block is centered. And let's style our input elements. So we'll give them a display block so they can be 100% width. And let's increase their size with a little bit of padding. And we'll try a little bit of margin, but I don't really like this, so I'm going to get rid of it. And actually, I'm going to set it to -1 for the top and the bottom. And then we'll go paste this in because I like how this looks now. Up next, we'll style the button elements. And to do this, we'll add some classes in our HTML. And then in our CSS, we'll go style it. We're going to get our blue Facebook color. And here we can see the button is updated. And now we'll apply some properties in the browser. We'll change our font color to white. We'll remove that border. Let's adjust the width here. And you might not notice this, but when I did a width on 100% on the button, it doesn't actually match the width on the inputs. You see the inputs are a little bigger. It's very, very hard to actually notice. The only reason I noticed actually was because I spent about 15 minutes and I actually cut that out of the video trying to figure this issue out. And if we reduce the width, we can see it's actually longer than the 100%. Okay, so we're going to use this property called box sizing and the value of border box. Now, don't really worry about what this is doing. The only thing you should care about is that it actually shrinks those input boxes back down to the correct size. So when we do a width of 100%, they actually span the 100% of the width of its parent element. So now we'll go back to styling that button where we left off. We'll add in a width, set it to 100%. Again, we'll remove that border. Don't save, of course. And we'll add some padding. And finally, we'll do a little bit of border radius. That looks pretty good. And some margin. We'll just mess with these numbers a little bit. Awesome, let's go ahead and copy that into our main.css. and we'll work on the new account button. So the only difference here is the actual background color. Right, so I'm just going to copy this in. It's basically the same. We just need to update the background color. So I'm just going to do like lime green. Check it out. Okay, not applying, so... Oh, I left the hashtag in. Yep, there we go. It's looking good. It's a little bright, so let's go with like forest green. And okay, I'm fine with that. Now, one thing again, remember they are sharing the exact same properties, so we're going to cut them out, and we're going to create a separate selector to apply the properties to all the elements, so that way we're not retyping the same code twice. And we'll update the width on the new account button because it is smaller. And we'll see how it looks. And we can see it looks pretty good now. So now if we align the text to the center, all of our elements will center up. And the last thing we need to deal with is that UL that I was mentioning when we were creating it. We cannot use this to style. That does not work. So we're actually just going to leave the period out completely. I don't really care about that. And there we go. Looking pretty good. Almost there. We got one or two things left maybe. So we'll select those A tags inside of our P element. And we'll remove the underline. And we're also going to update the color of that font so it matches that Facebook blue color. Okay, well that's it. Took about 20 minutes. I know that probably seemed pretty quick. Again, I've been doing this for a long time. Go back, rewatch the video if you need to. But the point is that eventually you can get to this point where you can just draw something out, do a little bit of HTML, do a little bit of CSS, and you have a nice looking website in a short amount of time. So just practice and practice and practice. That's it.